All right, so today I'm going to be sharing an hour-long recording between me and Terry Heddin, who's the CEO and founder of Marketopia, which is a marketing agency that's done over 10 million outbound dials. They have a lot of experience doing outbound, and so I got the pleasure of having a conversation with Terry for almost an hour to pick his brain on how he started his business, how the business grew to where it is today, how he manages 60 employees, and also share up-to-date tips and tricks about outbound dialing, cold calling, and how to maximize your results with outbound. You're not going to want to miss this. You're going to want to watch all the way to the end. So I'm just going to jump straight into the recording. Terry Heddin, he is the CEO of Marketopia, which is a massive outbound marketing agency. They've currently done, was it somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 outbound dials, booked close to 40,000 sales appointments. So been doing this for a while, have a lot of insights. Super excited to have you share with us. He's been in the game of outbound marketing a lot longer than I have. We're going to be talking about your story. We're going to be talking about how you grow in your business, some tactics. Terry, great to have you on.
Great to be here, Matt. I look forward to sharing everything I know.
So yeah, I gave a little bit of an intro, but do you want to just share a little bit of your background and what you do over at Marketopia?
Yeah, absolutely. My background before Marketopia is my 10th company. My first business in high school employed one of my friends, and we did lawns. I welded a trailer hitch to the bottom of a golf cart and turned it into a lawn service. That was my first company. Had a bunch of them. Some did well, some not so well. Had a couple of great exits. Sold 2 businesses and started Marketopia as a desire to help other people. One of my successful businesses was in the technology industry that struggles with sales and marketing. And that happened to be an area where I was strong. So I started a business to help people do what I was good at and hopefully help them achieve the same things that I did. So that's what gave birth to Marketopia, and it's been a wild ride. My IT company was in the Inc. 500 5 times, or 5,000 5 times. Marketopia has been there 5 times as well. So it's been a great adventure and an honor of a lifetime to lead the organization.
Congrats on your massive success. I'm very impressed. I run a cold email shop. We're a team of 5 or so people. You've run this business. You have 60 or so people, and I imagine tons and tons and tons of customers. So super interested to dive in, learn more about your story, and talk shop about outbound, because a lot of people watching this channel are either sending cold emails, doing some sort of dialing, or have some sort of business or in sales. From just what you mentioned, you've run a lot of businesses going all the way back to high school. You've been in business, you've been in sales for a while. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about how you started out and kind of like what was the progression? You can go as in-depth or as high level as you wanted to get here, but like walk me through, what does that journey look like going from, high school, starting your first business, to now crushing it, managing a bunch of guys and having a couple successful exits?
So my journey, grew up in a small town in America, was blessed with the admission to the University of Florida. Honestly, that was sort of my first break in life, to go from a small town, grow up on a horse farm, to attending UF, and that started my my professional career off on a good line, at least. After undergrad, I went to Ernst & Young Management Consulting, where I had the privilege to travel around the world doing high-level IT projects for companies like General Electric, Dell Computer, Wells Fargo, CSX Transportation, just Fortune 100 companies around the world. I worked all over Europe, all over the Americas, the Caribbean, and ended up leaving that world, the Big Five travel, 52 weeks a year world, to get into the .com game. And so I had a great time at a company called Infor, or Epiphany at the time. Now it's called Infor, in San Mateo, California, where I was one of the executives in the services organization responsible for getting the troubled projects completed with a happy client. And that was a fun adventure. Ended up working at a couple of the technology firms before starting my first tech firm, which was originally called Infinity Business Systems, but unfortunately, Infinity Business Systems is quickly shortened to IBS, which is a disease that's rather unsightly. So we abandoned that, and then it became Infinity Technology Solutions, or ITS. That was a really fun business. Had no money, but we could market and sell. So we grew to 49 people, about $500,000 in monthly recurring revenue, and was approached by a strategic buyer who wanted to get into the technology industry. Next thing you know, I was an employee and had fatter bank accounts. So that was one of the 2 exits that I enjoyed. Started a couple of companies in between those 2 ventures, but nothing really sparked. I've definitely been on both sides of the whole success, continuum. After I started my technology firm, we were recognized as one of the fastest growing companies in the world. We were on the Inc. 5,000 5 times, peaking at 659, I believe, fastest growing in the United States. So that was a great experience. I think we grew about 450% in a 3-year span. So that was something to be proud of. And, it was a great experience. Once I sold that business, I retired for a little while. I was 38 years old, trying to figure out kind of what to do next. Quickly realized that retirement for 38-year-olds is not very fun, because your friends are working. There's not a lot for you to do. So I ended up starting another company called Marketopia. And I worked with my partner which is now my wife, actually. She came from another technology company that's much larger, and then I came from mine, and our heads came together and we created a pretty cool organization, man. We grew very, very quickly. We were on Inc. 5000 5 times, peaking at Inc. 238 with 2,042% 3-year growth. So that was my one entry into the Inc. 500, which was kind of a bucket list lifetime, entrepreneurial dream. It's been a wild ride. We've ridden the technology industry as a customer base through the ups and downs of tech. It was awesome for a long time until interest rates started to go up, and then the technology industry took it on the chin a little bit. So we've been kind of innovating from there, trying to come up with ways to grow when the industry itself is not as aggressive as it once was. And so we continue to do that on a monthly basis, try and do the best we can to succeed regardless of what's going on in the world. And I feel like that's something that, my generation, we've been quite fortunate from an economic perspective, yours even more so. It's been good times for a long time, so it's been a great learning experience for me to figure out how to deal with problems that are completely outside of your control and to come up with innovative ways to succeed despite any headwinds in your face, And so that's been good. Started a few companies after that, but mainly around real estate and that type of thing. None that really took off like Marketopia did, though.
That's quite a journey. You've been in the game for a while and you've seen a lot of ups and downs. So it sounds, went from working for other people to starting your own technology company, exiting that at a young age, relatively, young age. I think most people wish they could have the opportunity to retire at late 30s. I totally get the itch and, getting back into it. And, here you are, you're crushing it, you're still growing. So you've been running Marketopia for a while now. You've run a lot of companies in the past. Take a step back and talk about ITS, like you exiting that at again, to what most people would consider is like absolutely insane, being a young age, being able to retire and whatnot. I want to dive into that in a second because I always think about in the future, this like fantasy that I'm going to get a bunch of money and then you just like do nothing all day and that somehow you're going to be happy. What was that like, that period of retirement where you're like taking a break in between? How did that expectation versus reality kind of turn out whenever you're doing that?
I think, the key to successful retirement is to come up with something that occupies you and fulfills you even in retirement. And I feel like in a normal retirement instance, you got grandkids and kids. Mm-hmm. You probably picked up a habit like golf. You have friends that are also retired or about to retire. The normal retirement has this community aspect to it. You have things to do that are fulfilling, but when you're super young, those things don't exist. Yeah. I was not surrounded by people in retirement, 40 years of fiddling around. And, I didn't have a garden at the time. It's not like I was kind of set up for any sort of rewarding activity. And I found that the two things that really were a struggle for me is one, the thoughts of just what are you going to do all day for the next 40 years? And then the second one is you have a lot of time to spend money. You think about it now, you're occupying, you're grinding every day. You only have a couple hours a day where you're kind of spending money. Whereas if you're retired, you literally have 12, 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day to spend money. And man, I got good at that. I was spending money like a drunken sailor, as they say. And that was something I didn't really factor in. I could have, in hindsight, I probably could have joined a country club and kind of take steps to create that environment. But at the time, I was excited to help people and give back to the industry that I came from and to try to make a difference. And so I was in a position to do that with my I was a professional motivational speaker. So I was able to go out and really speak 30, 40, 50 times a year and really give back. And one day after I sold, I really started doing a lot more speeches. And one day I was at a conference and the gentleman that from Atlanta said, "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" And that cup of coffee ended up being a very expensive cup of coffee for me because it gave birth to Marketopia. He basically expressed his desire to grow, his frustration with options out there. And I just offered to see what I could do to help him. And that led to what today is Marketopia, a large organization with offices in Mexico City, London, as well as Tampa, Florida. So it's been a wild ride, man. And once you have that entrepreneurial fire in you, it's hard to extinguish that. If you exit for 100 million or something like that, it's probably a lot easier. But if you're not in a spot where you're like, I had more money than I could possibly know what to do with, it's hard to extinguish that flame. It's burning in you, and it's burning in you probably since you were a young child. It's fun. It's fun to start businesses. It's fun to invent things. It's fun to hire people. It's fun to change lives and make a difference, And for me, it was all about that last one, making a difference. How could I help people achieve their dreams? Marketopia has been a great organization for that, both as employees as well as customers.
Sounds like a very exciting journey, and I could totally sympathize with everything you're saying too. So that makes sense. I want to dive dive in. I want to make sure we also talk shop Outbound. Still want to dive in a little bit more about the company and how you've grown it, because as a young entrepreneur, now managing 4 full-time employees, I can imagine that as things scale, they start to get more and more complex, especially driving results at scale. That's one thing to hire a bunch of people. You see all these big companies raising a bunch of money. They hire a bunch of people. They fire a bunch of people. But doing it well, doing it successfully, coming from the ground up, not having gazillions of dollars of incoming investment. Now you manage, you said 60 or so employees. What management practices have you kind of adopted to be able to maintain that quality at scale? I know a ton of people probably watching this video, they either starting their company, they might be doing some outbound stuff similar. I see a lot of people flounder whenever it comes to like hiring people, managing people, and starting to do that at scale. And you've done that successfully. So what management practices do you have in place to kind of be able to like build a team at this type of scale and make it successful?
In my other entrepreneurial adventures in my youth, I didn't have a lot of the knowledge and experience that I do now. Wisdom has certainly taught me some things by making some good decisions and by making some bad ones. I'll tell you, one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur to do is to get out of their way, get out of their team's way. As you can hire people to delegate business to, don't micromanage them, don't override them. Even if they're 80% as good as you, you're still better off to delegate and level up yourself. As we grew, one of the things I think I attribute a lot of success to is first being blessed with amazing people. A bad hire can set you back. I've made a bad hire and it set me back a year, but I've made good hires that have been springboards for me as well. We run EOS, the word traction, the book traction. That has been a wonderful thing probably over the last 5 years or so as we navigated changes in the economy and changes in the industry. That's been a blessing to sort of create that vehicle where everybody in the team can row in the same direction. And it's really important as an organization grows to make it way more than just about the leader and to try to empower people to make decisions independently and take actions independently to take care of your customers, to get new ones, that type of thing. So EOS allowed us to do that. We knew what the common goals were. They were delegated down to the individual level, and it was more about execution at that point.
Makes sense. So it sounds like a lot of it is getting the right people in place. Also, making those mistakes, learning those yourself the hard way, which everyone has to do. And then, having a good system in place. You talk about EOS traction. I've heard a lot of other entrepreneurs talk about how that's been insanely helpful. So that makes a ton of sense. Let's shift gears and, this channel and all my YouTube and all my content is outbound focused. You run a large calling team. I do a lot of email. We send zillions of emails. You made over 10 million dials, booked tens of thousands of sales appointments over phone, which is no small feat. I think there's extremely impressive to say the least. Walk me through like outbound dialing at a high level for someone who's considering getting into it. What do you think are like the main kind of levers or keys to success? Like if you're a business owner, you're trying to get into dialing, you want to start building this function out. Maybe you want to hire an amazing agency like Marketopia to help you do that. But for the business owner who's starting out from scratch, what would you tell them when it comes to like building a dialing function?
I tell you, it's more complicated now than it's ever been. It's a difficult function. It sounds easy, much like sending an email sounds easy, right? How difficult could it possibly be, Matt? I mean, all you do is hit send, upload a list, and hit send.
Yeah,
there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Don't underestimate that. You've got to create a lot of things for it to be successful, and I'll kind of go through those in the hope that it would help. So first thing is the environment. We'd have a large digital marketing team, and a large telemarketing team, and a large sales training team. And I'll go into why in a second. But the tele team, we create a physical environment that was very motivating and inspiring. Great headsets that block out the noise so that we could have noise. So we can have great music to kind of get the blood pumping. We have a very motivating leader in there that is inspiring and motivating every day. Starts off with a blood pumping kind of motivational speech and really does a great job using KPIs, positive reinforcement, gamification, spiffs, a lot of different things to kind of keep the team motivated because it's very difficult to achieve results. One of the key things is effort. And frankly, that is a very hard thing to do, to get a human being to make 2,000 dials a month in a B2B environment. In other words, one dial, one dial, one dial. So 100 calls a day or more is a very difficult thing to do. I would tell you that the vast majority of people that achieve that KPI are faking it. So we have a lot of efforts around making sure that people are following best practice, that are making the dials necessary, that are doing what it takes to get the appointments for our customers. Because we launched as a digital agency, Matt. So my original business plan and yours are not that different.
Yeah.
The difference is that, frankly, I'm terrible at failing. I'm terrible at losing. So when we lose a customer, it would eat me alive, and I try to fix it is kind of my logic. And so that led from digital marketing, which produced very little qualified sales appointments, to a tele organization, which produced a lot more, to now I still get fired for people not closing deals. So even if I give them 1 million appointments, if they don't close any deal, I still get fired. So then I started a sales solve for a business owner. Yeah. So that's a key element to success, is to make sure that you're focused on the end result. Make sure that it's a win-win-win. The customer is winning, you're winning, your team's winning. Create that environment that's conducive to success, hold people accountable for working smart and hard, and the results will follow. We do that through policies, procedures, and controls, yes, but also people. Great people. Why I said it's more complicated today is because there's 3 types of employees now in a B2B segment. 4, if you really want to step back even further. The 3 types that we have are AI employees, right? Voice agents, nearshore, which is an alternative to offshore. They're basically in other countries, but they speak excellent English. And then local, domestic. And so we have those 3. There's also what I call offshore, which I think of like an India call center, a Filipino call center, and nothing wrong with those. Price points are lower. And then there's a stereotype that goes along with them that maybe isn't attractive to some, but the costs are worth it to others. Managing that stack that includes AI has made everything that we do much more complicated, and it will be that going forward. Keeping up with the regulations around AI, the technologies and innovations around AI is going to be hard, but also just try to help the customer understand the 3 that we work with: AI, nearshore, onshore, understand the pros and cons of each to make sure they do what's right for their business, you know?
Makes a ton of sense. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. My initial start was, again, servicing an IT customer and also in the digital marketing space. And we transitioned to outbound for probably sounds like similar reasons. And also the sales training thing is another piece. Like having good sales process in place, I think, is something that is very underrated. I don't know if your experience is similar, but whenever I talk to most business owners, they'll say, yeah, you get me on the phone, I'll close the deal. All you gotta do is get me the appointment.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I can't be further from the truth, unless it's they're used to closing a referral who had a layup, and it's just more of like signing the pen and paper rather than like actually conducting sales. So I can sympathize with that heavily. And then, yeah, talking about how the landscape has changed. Changes are inevitable. Changes are going to continue. Things are going to get harder. But also, I think for the people to innovate, they're almost going to be easier. Email has changed a lot, but that resistance has almost given headwind to the people that want to try and do it, because then it weeds out people that don't. I think there's more opportunity than ever, and like calling especially. I think one interesting point you brought up a lot that I don't see as much in email is that like motivational piece. Like dialing is very much like a people game. Emails, whether I'm in a good mood or a bad mood, they'll get sent out, right? If Google or Microsoft's in a bad mood and they want to throw us in spam, that's a different type of situation. But I totally can imagine that the people environment is a huge component. You have offices, all your guys are in office. I'd imagine you have a good team managing them and making sure they're motivated, as you talked about before. Let's dive in a little more about like the dialing process itself. I know you talk about those 3 different components. Is that how you kind of segment out whenever you're doing dialing on behalf of customers? You have like the AI agents, you have the onshore, and you have the nearshore, or is that more so for like the recipient, like those are the people you are dialing themselves? Is that like the 3 buckets of kind of like you doing the dials?
We offer all 3. We have a really great AI solution that is still, it will always be an R&D, but it's a pretty evolved AI bot, and that it's a very effective and inexpensive way to offer 24/7 appointment setting based off of campaign results. We then have the nearshore piece and the onshore piece, and they all have their place. There's not one better than the other, you know. In my mind, nothing beats in country, specifically an American caller. We had more success for Americans calling into Europe than Europeans calling into Europe. And there's a lot of things about the US culture that makes outbound a little more successful than other markets. But not everyone can afford that. You know, it's not an inexpensive thing. You know, to get into an environment like we're in here where there's really no accent is not easy. A lot of the least cost options out there have a heavy accent, which is a negative in the tele game. So yeah, we help the customers navigate that and decide what's best for them, and then make sure that we're successful as we possibly can be given the constraints that they have.
Well, let's jump a little bit deeper into dialing and whatnot. Again, you guys make a ton of dials. It sounds like a lot of your guys are making like 100 or so dials per day. What strategies do you guys use to maximize? Because I know that, talk time is an important piece. And from email, it's not only, I can speak from experience, like outbound numbers is not the only metric that matters. You can make a bunch of dials and not have them perform well, or you can make a handful of dials, get some good talk time, get some good leads, and close some deals. But what tactics and tips would you give to someone out there who's watching this video that wants to, maximize their talk time, maximize their conversion rates? Because I know that's nice thing about dialing is you can be there, talk to them, and, make sure that you get that like touch point before the call. So what tactics you use to kind of like maximize the efficacy of your calling efforts?
I'm going to give you a bigger answer than the question, because I think it's really important to understand that someone like you, Matt, is a really critical part to a successful teleactivity. Marketing is very important. I call it the Air Force, right? They're kind of flying planes or dropping leaflets, emails, whatever. They're softening the ground to make the calling easier, which is more like the Army. You're out there marketing, creating that brand recognition, create that name recognition, that type of thing, creating that brand equity, educating, building a digital relationship with people. That's what marketers do. And that's where telesuccess starts. Cold calling is very difficult. Warm calling is a lot better. So, Matt, if I followed up on a campaign of yours and I took the people who opened emails, shared emails, clicked through, read a blog, whatever, and called them first, I'm going to be a lot more successful than if I just got a list, picked out the phone book and started calling people, right? It starts with marketing. And in my mind, marketing starts with a great list. So you really want to make sure that you invest time and energy in making sure that you define a great list for your organization, not based on whatever pipe dream you have for what your organization could be or you want it to be, but based on what it is today. In other words, how big of a company can I actually close? What does my demographic look like that I can actually close, that actually wants my product, that I have the skills and abilities to close? Like, understand, be honest with yourself about what your real customer looks like. And then you engage a marketing firm to start doing the job of the Air Force. And then you bring in that teleorganization that's been the beneficiary of a great list and marketing qualified leads that come from a digital marketer. And those two things are the low hanging fruit. And then you complement that with warm calling. And if you have to, cold calling. And if you do that, we can produce about 10 times the results of a digital marketing activity alone. Great email campaign, obviously depending on the product or service, may generate 1 appointment or 10 appointments. If you have a great telecampaign, you can often 10x that. And when you start doing that at scale, it starts to make material changes in the results of the overall initiative. So one of the key things for a customer to do is to step back and stop trying to make everyone accountable. Step back and go, okay, I understand this is an orchestra. Matt's part of that. Terry's a part of that. There's different players playing different instruments. The goal is for everyone to work together, help each other, and produce the desired results. And the better they work together, the better they collaborate, the better they share information, the better they team, the more successful the overall will be. And a lot of customers make the mistake of saying, okay, I'm smarter than these guys. I'm going to hire Terry and Matt, and they're going to compete. The winner is the one that's going to get my business. And I'll say, that's not really a fair competition. Obviously, I'm better looking. I'm just playing. It's that marketing and tele work together. They're not competitive. They're collaborative. And for each to be successful, they need to work together. That doesn't mean marketing won't work by itself. And it doesn't mean tele won't work by itself. But if you start doing the two together, you can be a lot more successful. And you see a lot of people these days starting to skimp on the marketing side. And they'll say, well, how many qualified sales appointments did that email campaign get versus tele? And you're like, how many of the tele campaign leads did I get because of the email going out first? Right? It's not that simple. We like to educate customers and help them understand the big picture so they make wise business decisions until we earn their trust. And once we earn their trust, then we can really start achieving things because we try to make tweaks in the contract, tweaks in the solution set, tweaks in the tactics, tweaks in the promotions to try to drive results.
You bring up a really good point there of like what we do, if you're doing like outbound dialing, outbound email, outbound anything, it really is on like the cusp of like sales and marketing. You're not just solely marketing focused where you're trying to get impressions and leads and whatnot, trying to get them into appointments, which is now a sales function. So I think a lot of people underrate that. Yeah, like your analogy of like softening them up and then having someone come in for the actual getting the job done is very true. Like our most successful campaigns when we run email stuff is to warm lists. Like everyone's magic wand answer is they want a total stranger to come on the phone, ready to buy their service and, hand their credit card and just have agents do everything in between, which we'd love to do that. And some, it works out that way for some people, but in a lot of cases, they don't have the infantry. We'll get someone over, this part of the marathon, but you need to drag them across the line. There's a lot of stuff that goes into like a deal being closed, especially from totally cold, right? Let's say you do that outbound cold calling campaign and you set those appointments, even though you soften them up and you got your infantry in, you drag them over. That person, he needs a lot more education, training, whatnot. They're not going to wire someone $10, $15, $100,000 for your solution after one cold call and one sales call, right? So like that's definitely something that I have noticed internally, and like we do a lot of marketing activity and sales activity, and like I think a lot of people underrate what goes into it. Also, another point that you bring up, like being honest about who you're reaching out to. We do an exercise with our customers where it's like the last 10 customers exercise where we'll ask customers, say, hey, who's the last 10 people you closed? We use that to inform our outbound stuff because, again, a lot of people, they'll run this massively successful business, start up this new leg of the business, it's unproven, and then want to run outbound for that. And then again, it's like you're starting from scratch at that point. It's effectively like you're setting yourself up for a lot higher chance of failure than if you do pour gas on the fire. I like to think, good cold email, good outbound, it's just pouring gas on the fire. If you're trying to get that fire started from scratch, that's like, a lot of times it's more of like your job is to test rather than to like scale. So, right. And I'd imagine that's, you see that a lot too. You mentioned earlier about like your customers closing deals. We've noticed similar things, especially for guys that have never had their business has been reliant on referrals. They don't understand how much effort goes in that kind of sales process. What do you think are the big keys or unlocks? If, let's say, there's someone out there, they're doing some dialing, they're doing some emailing, they're doing some DMs, they're doing some marketing activity, they're getting meetings, and they haven't closed cold before. They're used to just having their customer and they come in, they're ready to buy because, Sally, their other customers said great things and they're ready to pay the money. And now they're trying to run, outbound or any sort of other marketing campaigns. What are the big levers that you've seen to help organizations trying to build a true sales function, get out of founder-led sales? What do you think those big levers or unlocks are to help them close cold deals?
I can tell you that what you just described is the bane of my existence at this point. My team is very effective at driving leads. That is definitely not a problem. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, we're starting to offer other industries under different companies. We've spin off people to dedicate to other industries because we're finding the success that we have is based on the system and the people and not the industry. When I think about why I'm not a billion-dollar company and why I'm not driving Elon Musk's boat, it's because of sales. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good a marketer is if the sales team can't close a deal. And in my mind, there's a lot of challenge that goes into basically helping a successful company be more successful. If they're failing miserably, they tend to be humble. And at that point, it's just about fear and spending money. But if they're successful, which they have to be to basically afford you, Matt, or me, they have to be somewhat successful. You have to get through the fact that what got you here today is not what's going to get you where you're trying to go. Usually it comes down to cutting corners in the sales process. When a word of mouth lead comes in, if you don't drool on yourself, it should be kind of a done deal. It's like you show up, it's your dad's fraternity brother, for goodness sakes. How can you possibly lose this deal? We don't do that. We try to get more referrals and we do get more than they would get on their own, but that's not as scalable as normal marketing leads are. So the mental journey that I take customers through trying to get their sales machine going is this concept. You're entitled to nothing. No one put their reputation on the line to elevate yours. You're going to have to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And I explained that there's a 10-rung ladder. And if you have a good website, that's a rung. You got some good digital marketing, that's another rung. You got digital marketing, that's another rung. You showed up on time, that's another rung. Now you're at rung 4, but you got to get to 10 to win the deal. Mm-hmm. How do you get there? It's about earning it, doing what it takes to earn the trust, to earn the relationship, to earn the belief and confidence in you and your company to sign on the contract. It's a very difficult journey for a lot of people because it comes down to being completely unnatural. When you get someone on the phone, the natural thing that salespeople do is to talk, right? Share, that my company's effing awesome, my systems are awesome, my people are awesome, I'm awesome, sign here. Okay, well, that's not going to win. Everyone says they're awesome. You've got to earn their trust. And in my mind, that really starts off with listening. Being a great listener. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth because you should listen twice as much as you talk. And that's very difficult for people to do. You got to get them talking about the drivers of their decision-making process, what they like, what they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. Understand what you're dealing with so that you can use that to your advantage later on in the sales process. So we slow them down, help them understand that it's a system that you go through to earn that trust, climb that ladder to win more than your fair share. And what I found is there is an ocean of terrible salespeople out there that if you can just execute a great sales methodology right, you have a sustainable competitive advantage in the market. The system that I advocate is really, I was featured in the Sandler Rules book, the Sandler sales methodology. There's a book called Sandler Rules, and my company was featured in there because we really, really embraced that. How do I gain the trust of the person that I'm working with? In our sales methodology, there's 5 different touch points physically, in addition to up to 29 touch points digitally. And that is how you get to the point where when you talk, they listen. When you ask for a relationship, they give it to you. When you ask for $1, they hand it to you. That is a journey. And people have to understand that. The fallacy is that marketing and sales are two different things. The reality is that neither is successful without the other. So a great marketer starts off their arrangement by saying, while we're getting this going, this machine that I'm building for you, I want you to get your sales machine ready for it. Get it ready for a marketing lead that doesn't know you from Adam, starting off on ring 1, 2, or 3 of a 10-ring ladder that's equipped to earn the right to win the deal, because that will determine our ultimate success and failure.
I want to highlight one point that you said there, the touch points. You mentioned like 5 physical, 29 digital. I think that's one thing that people completely misunderstand is like in the case that your dad's fraternity, whatever's guys ready to, pay you money. They had years of talking to whoever it was beforehand. They've had, a gazillion touch points, and then that trust is transferred over to you with the referral. If you're a cold person, or even from an inbound flow, like people watch my channel and, schedule a call, they might have watched 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours of content. And then when they get on the call, it's a lot more simpler of a sales process. Great thing about outbound, not to say like outbound is the hardest. The best part is that you can pick who you're reaching out to. You have the flow. I can turn it on and off. There's so many amazing things about outbound, but they just underrate that you have to like artificially inject the trust that takes that like 29 digital sales points, 5 physical sales points. A lot of people misunderstand like what quite literally happened is we sent an email, you're on a call with them. They need a lot more. If they're going to give you 10 grand, they need a lot more than a 30-minute conversation to do that, right? You could have the best stuff in the world, but people need to know that you're not a scammer. People need to know that you do what you do. People need to know you drive results. People need to like you a little bit. I think that a lot of people don't understand what led to the sale. And so then, they think that the call is the same, but like, I forgot who it was. I'm stealing this from someone else. I think the term is trust hours. It's like, how many trust hours you have with someone where they're either consuming your content, they had some sort of touch point or interaction so that they can know that, they can build that trust. Of your most successful customers, for people out there, they want to start outbounds. They're hearing, all right, we have to have a good system in place. We got to have a team in place. We need to give this some time to make it work. We want to pick these people. We want to do these tactics. We're going to give this a go. And they understand that the sales is a big piece. What other things have you seen in your most successful customers that you'd recommend that, someone out there, they're considering working with a company like yours or a company like mine, or they want to do this themselves? What commonalities you see of your most successful customers that you'd want to pass on to them that they can replicate?
The first word that comes to mind is humility.
Mm-hmm.
Hubris is something that a lot of successful people have, and they've earned that by being successful. And humility is what prepares you to enter different growth phases professionally as well as with your company. So sometimes you have to step back and rebuild a new foundation to scale it from there. You can't always do the way you've been doing, or you won't achieve what you are trying to achieve, because by definition, if that was all that was necessary, you would have already achieved it, right? So they come to someone like you and I for help. And the key is to listen and think and not come in thinking you know all the answers. Because if you did, you would be on the other side of the call that you're making. And second thing that comes to mind is that sales is very important, and don't underestimate the importance of having a finely run, fine-tuned sales machine that can take a moderately warm lead and turn it into an engaged and happy customer. So when you hire a firm that's focused on opening doors for you, your entire existence should not be based on being skeptical and pushback and micromanaging that vendor. Your entire existence should be based on, okay, when they give me a lead, I'm going to make sure that I win, and focus on that. And you have a lot better chance of success. The last thing is to find people who know what the heck they're doing. A lot of people fall into this misunderstanding that tactics are what drives results, when it's a combination of experience and wisdom and tactics, right? So a person that knows an industry is worth more than a person that doesn't. A person who leverages AI is a lot more valuable to you than one that doesn't. Mm-hmm. Don't think of AI as a shortcut that you should pay less for. Think of it as an advantage that you should pay more for. Mm-hmm. So you take someone like yourself, Matt, that's obviously very good at what you do, bolt on AI tools. Like, I would love to take what you do and bolt some of our AI technologies on there to see what would happen, because it may double or triple results. And the reality is right now you need to get to an AI forward agency, someone who's leveraging it not to cut corners and be cheap, but leveraging it to gain an advantage. And then the last thing I would say is to be patient and disciplined in your investment. Marketing is not something that you measure ROI on in days or weeks or even months, but actually quarters or years is how you really look at marketing. You have to be patient and let it work, because there's actually 2 growth curves. So you have the marketer's growth curve. They come in, no appointments, no leads the first send, the first month, first week, and then it gradually builds up to maybe maybe 90 days in, you start getting to where you're in that range of a consistently high performer. And then in addition to that, you have your sales curve. So they're starting to learn get these marketing leads. There's a delay there, and then they have to go through their own growth curve. So it's not unlikely that a successful marketing and lead generation program takes 12 months or more to really hit maximum performance. So be patient and be disciplined. Find someone you trust and give them the time necessary to be successful, but hold the sales team accountable for doing their part, because if you don't, they're going to blame marketing for everything. Yeah. So you've got to have, accountability and discipline to be successful.
Yeah, very great points. And, I see the same, which is, humility. The one struggle, I'm sure, I don't know how you can sympathize, but not to say, obviously customers pay outsource agencies because they want to get things set up quickly and whatnot. But also at the same time, sometimes it's because they were doing things the wrong way. And that's why, they need someone to help in the first place. Find people that know what they're doing. You want to have good butts in seats. They can figure out the tactics for you. The tactics are constantly changing is the reality of it, and the nuances and whatnot. Sales is very important. I think a lot of people sleep on that. If you sit down and do some ROI calculations, if you're selling a B2B service that costs anything, the cost to acquire someone on the marketing side is usually a fraction of what you can make on the back end if you convert. I even tell a lot of customers, if you can close at 10%, which is below what I would consider, standard KPI, or even 5%, usually it makes sense. The issue that, we have some customers that close at 20, 30, 50%, which is amazing. But if we can even get them to that, mediocre level, that's what we're looking for. And then patience. I 100% agree. Yeah, there's the marketing curve, which takes time to get the leads. Then there's the sales curve, which is it takes sales cycle to not only, assuming they execute everything properly, which even takes time, it usually will take a couple months to close the deal. Depending on the product, it could take months or years. And so it's about building that pipeline. I think, for someone who's out there who wants to commit to outbound, do the math beforehand. If it makes sense, give it the time it takes to breathe. Otherwise, I advocate to a lot of people, if you have channels that are working, double down, triple down. If you're going to commit to something like this, it takes a lot of effort. So Terry, I know you're really busy. Thank you so much for sharing your time. Hopefully everyone watching this got a lot of value out of this. For anyone who's watching this video that's man, Terry's awesome, I want to give him a call or talk to his team, where can they find you?
Marketopia.com, Marketopia.com. Reach out to the team. They're amazing. And I'm honored to work with them.
Thank you so much for your time. Anyone, check out Terry's stuff. Check out his site. They do wonderful work. Hopefully you got some value out of this video, and appreciate you all for watching. Take care.